Good morning and welcome to today's REA 9 webinar on importing. I'm Bobby with Tech Support and I'll be walking you through the process of importing data from Excel into your REA database. So you should be able to see my screen now, and so I've got a database right now of 27 properties, and I'm going to be importing a spreadsheet of buildings and owners into the database to show you how that works. Now, you can import different things, like you can import contacts, companies, spaces, but the general premise is always the same on importing. It's going to work the same. So I'm just going to show you from the most common standpoint, which is importing properties and owners. However, if you have like sales comparables or spaces and tenants to import, that's able to be done as well. It's just going to have you selecting slightly different fields. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that our Excel spreadsheet is ready to be imported. So I've got my Excel spreadsheet here, and this is what I'm going to be importing today. It's a spreadsheet of a bunch of buildings in various parts of Los Angeles County, as well as the owners of those buildings. Now, the first thing to do, I've already done this just because it can kind of be a long process. You want to make sure that you've standardized the data and fixed anything that's problematic with it. So like what I mean by that is, like, in addresses, it's a good idea to make sure it's consistent. Like if it says Boulevard, make sure it's always BLVD. In this case, I have it all set to the abbreviations with no periods. Not generally how I do it. I usually do it with the full name, except if it's Boulevard or Causeway or anything like that. But basically the main point is to make sure it's consistent. That way you don't end up with duplicates due to not having the information in there the same way on each one of these. Other things to look for when you're getting ready to import for fields such as, like, say, any dollar value fields, such as the loan amount or anything like that. When it comes into REA, it needs to just be a numerical value. So for the most part, a good general rule of thumb is if it has a dollar sign in front of it in the Excel spreadsheet, remove any dollar signs beforehand. That will, the dollar signs will provide problems when importing in, because most of those fields, such as, if we go to the listing tab here, like the sale price, if you right-click on it and go to properties, you can see what type of field it is. And in the case of sale price, it's an integer field, meaning only whole numbers can be imported into that field. So a good thing to do is just to make sure and see which fields you're going to be importing into, and make sure that it's consistent with what's in your spreadsheet. So like sale price, make sure that it doesn't have any dollar signs in it in your spreadsheet. Because when you enter the sale price, like let's say this one was 1.5 million or 15 million, it'll automatically put the dollar sign in there for you. So it's not necessary to keep the dollar sign on the spreadsheet beforehand. Same thing goes for like decimal values, or like for interest, it should be a percentage. So just kind of go through, look at the spreadsheet side by side with your database, and see where you're going to put that information, just kind of to give you an idea of where your data is going to go. Now, when you have your spreadsheet ready, you need to actually save it in a different format. So right now it's an XLSX, so a default Excel document, and we want to save it as a CSV. So what we do is just go to File and Save As, and we want to choose Save As Type here, drop that down, and choose CSV, delimited. So that's a really basic, just text-based format that REA can read to then import in. So any weird formatting that you have in your spreadsheet, any like colors or anything bold, will be removed from that. It basically just takes just the information in it. And then just hit save. You're always going to get this message saying that it contains features that are not compatible. So just hit yes on that, and then we can actually close out of the spreadsheet now. So I'm just going to hit don't save. The spreadsheet does need to be closed when you're ready to import the data in. So now we're ready to start matching the fields up and having the import start. So to do the import, you just go to File, Import, and select File/Database. This is going to bring up the File/Database import screen. So we're going to kind of start off here. What kind of data do you want to import? Well, there are a few options here. So one pitfall I see a lot of people making is they're not sure what they want to import in. Well, because they're like, well, I have owners, but I also have property information. Well, in that case, you'd want to do a property import. The property import will import the properties as well as contacts that are linked to the property. It has a spot for 3 different contacts. The site contact, which would be for an on-site property manager, the owner, and the listing agent. Sales comps goes a little bit more further into detail on that, as well as having a buyer and a seller and a listing and procuring agent. So some of these get a little bit more complicated than others. Spaces has a property import embedded within it, so you're able to import exactly what you have in the properties import, as well as spaces and the tenants that lease those spaces. So it's kind of like thinking about what's the highest level that that you're going to be importing in. So if you have contacts and companies, you would choose contacts, since companies goes into it automatically. If you have properties as well as contacts, you would choose properties. If you have spaces as well as properties and tenants, you could choose spaces, and so on. So we're going to select properties here. Now, the next option is either to use an existing import map or create a new import map. Well, this is our first time using this map, or using this file to import in. So this time we're going to create a new import map. However, if you're getting spreadsheets from like a data company or any title company, anything like that, where you're going to be getting spreadsheets with different information in it but the same columns, you can save the import map so you don't have to redo all this work every single time. You can also use it to make sure that you save it. That way, if something goes awry, you don't have to start completely over from scratch, and you can just make changes to the import map and change it like that. So we're going to do create a new import map and drop this down, and we're going to choose comma delimited file with header. Most of the time that tends to be what you end up choosing. What that means is comma delimited file is that CSV format, and then with header, meaning that the first row are the column names. So we had owner name, property name, and so on. So I'm going to select that, and finally we do select the file to import. So we click on that, and I'm going to go into my CSV file, select it, and hit open. And now we're ready to do the mapping. So when we hit next, it's going to bring up the actual screen. This is where all the work is done on the import. This is where we tell REA which column in Excel, which is the source fields on the right side, matches up to which field in REA, which are the destination fields on the left side. So when you start off, you have all of your Excel fields available to you on the right side, and on the left side, we have basically nothing until we've actually started. So to give a quick overview, there's 4 tabs at the top. One is property, one is site for the site contact, one is owner, and one is agent. So each of these will import into different tables. The property will import into the actual properties table, whereas site, owner, and agent will import into the contacts and be a linked contact to the property. Now within these 3 contact tabs, there's 2 further tabs here where it says either owner company or owner contact. So that gives you further ability to be able to import into both the company side and the contact side. And here where it says import as, that determines whether what data type the owners are. So if all of your owners are just the companies of the owners and you don't have like the names, well, you could select import as company. However, if you have the names, you want to select import as contact. So now we're going to start matching up the fields. So here where it says field name, if we click in that box, we'll see that it turns into a little drop-down box. We can drop this down and select the different fields in REA. Now the fields are going to be different based on which one of these tabs we're on. Because we're on the property tab, it's going to show us specifically property fields. If we go to the owner, that's actually going to show slightly different fields, like the full name, whereas that's not available from the property tab. So you kind of have to separate the work a little bit, do the property information on the property side and the owner information on the owner's side. So what I do is I just start off with the first field here that matches up to a property. In this case, it's going to be property name. Of course, I don't actually have anything in the spreadsheet with that field, but we're going to do it anyway. So we just select from this list the field that we're wanting to import into, and then to match the one from Excel, all we do is drag the field from the source fields into the expression box, and that matches it up. So it doesn't matter if what the order is on the source fields here, since you're just dragging and dropping to match it up. Next up, we have address 1. Now, addresses work a little bit weird on properties because there's 2 main ways that you will end up getting information in your spreadsheets. One is that you'll have just one single field that has the address, like I have right here, where it has 20832 Van Owen Street and so on, 20900 Roscoe Boulevard. However, a lot of spreadsheets have that separated, where you'll have the address number, so just the 20900, the direction, and the street name. So let's see if I have one that actually has a direction here. And not so much. So in that case, there's a few different options. If it's all in one, you can select address 1 and match the field like that. That's the simplest way. However, if it is separated, that's no problem. What you can do is choose like address number 1 for the numerical portion. For the direction, there's a field called direction, and then there's also a field called street. Now, however you have it in your spreadsheet, it's going to come into REA the same way. If you have it all in one, like this where it has address 1, it'll import into the address and automatically separate out the numeric portion, the direction, and the street name. If you have them separated initially, it'll automatically combine them into address 1. So either way you have it, it's going to go all into the same place in that case. So I'm just going to kind of work my magic here and match up some more fields. So city matches up to city. You can also put your cursor in there, and instead of using the drop-down box, you can start typing the field name. For stuff like zip code where I don't want to go all the way to the bottom, I can just type Z and that'll show up. So now we come up to one, owner name, which is not in the property side. So what I do is I just ignore that field for right now, and we'll come back to that when we go over to the owner tab. So I'm going to move on to the next field, building size. These are all going to actually match up. Sometimes you'll have a field that doesn't match up the name identically. That doesn't matter. All you need to do is figure out which field you want to import it into. So, like for example, if you had a field called like, I don't know, like for example, if the building size was actually just called square footage, well, you would just still match it up to the building size field in REA. It's just a matter of finding the correct match for what you need. It doesn't matter if the names match up at all. You don't have to go through your spreadsheet and change the column headers to make sure of that every single time. Also, sometimes you'll come across fields which you don't have, like you have a column in your Excel spreadsheet, like a lender name, whereas REA does not have a field for that. Well, you can select the 12 user fields to import information like that into. So like we have user 1 through user 12. I've already renamed user 1 to bicycle racks, so that should show up under, actually I don't even remember what I named it to now. But you can import into those user fields and change the name later on. Or you can actually just cancel out of here. I'm just going to save the map where I am right now and call it webinar property. And we can cancel out and get back to our database and easily come back to this. So, for example, if I wanted to rename one of the fields, I wanted the, that would be Y. Wanted to change the field name to bicycle racks to import into that field, I could just right-click on the field, go to Properties, and change the caption on it. And then we can get right back where we were just by going to Import File/Database, choosing Properties. This time we're going to use an existing import map. Choose that map that we just saved, hit OK, and we just select that same Excel file. And it'll bring us back right where we were. We can hit Edit Map to get back to the editing process, but this actually quickly shows you a view of what the information is going to look like when it comes into the database. So we can always see what the information is going to look like and kind of look for errors in here. So I'm going to go back to Edit Map and just kind of continue on. So we've got address 2. I'm just going to match that up. Got APN. That's a field I actually changed the name of. In REA by default, it's named parcel, but I renamed it to APN. So when you rename a field in your database, when you go to import into that field, it's going to use the name that you gave it, not the original name. So parcel is no longer parcel when I'm doing an import. It's now under APN. So those are all the property fields I'm going to do. I actually am not going to use date created just because it automatically puts that in, and I just used that to find properties. So next we're going to go over to the owner tab. Now I see, looking at my fields in my spreadsheet, that I have owner contact as well as owner company information. So I'm going to start off on the company tab. I always suggest this. If you have both company and contact information, start on the company tab because it'll save you a lot of work by doing that. So the reason for that is if I import the address over here, address 1, do address 2. When you click on the contact tab, you'll see it automatically filled in those fields for me. So that's why I suggest starting off on the company tab and then working over to the contact tab because it'll automatically fill in that information like that for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish off these fields. City. Okay, so for company, one thing happens. When you match up the company name and drag and drop into there, you'll notice it also automatically fills in a field called organization. Now, don't worry about that. You never want to delete that. All companies in your database just have to have an organization name. It doesn't matter if it's the same as the company name. It has to have something there. It's a field that just can't be left blank. So it automatically assumes most of the time your spreadsheets don't have a separate company and organization name. Organization being like a parent company if it's different from the company name. So it just assumes that it's going to be the same as the company name. So that's why it does that. If you do find that you have a separate field for that, you could just like drag and drop right into that field and override what it had in there. So next, state and zip code are the last two fields that I'm going to put on the company side. And now we can go over to the contact tab, and we see all those fields automatically filled in. So now I'm just going to fill in the blanks. I've got the owner name, email, and phone number. So I just need to fill those in. Now, kind of like the address on the property, when you're importing contacts, it's usually one of two ways in the spreadsheet. It's either going to be all in one field. So in this case, I have it all in one field. John L. Gregg, for example, is in one column. But occasionally, you'll end up with multiple columns, one for first name, one for last name. What you can do in that case is there's separate fields. One is full name, and then there's also a field called first name and a field called last name. So however you have it in your spreadsheet, you're able to import it into REA. Now, if I import into full name, it's automatically going to separate the first and the last name into the appropriate fields in REA. So you don't have to worry about, like, if you have it both ways, you just have to import it once. You don't have to import both first name and last name and then separately do full name. If you do first name and last name separately, it'll combine them into the full name field in REA. If you do full name, it'll separate them into the first name and last name. So next, we'll just do the email. And then finally, one thing to kind of notice is the phone number. Now, when I import into phone, I'm going to import the owner phone number into the work phone number. You'll notice when I bring it over here, all the other fields, you just see the name of the field in Excel in brackets. Whereas this one, it automatically sets it up to say format phone and then owner phone. So that automatically takes whatever you have in your spreadsheet and converts it to the phone number format, where it'll have parentheses around the area code and then a space, the prefix, then a hyphen, and the suffix. So no matter how your information is in Excel, whether it's, you know, 3 numbers, dot 3 numbers, dot 4 numbers, or you have it like just the numeric, just the numbers, so it would be like 85855511212, or whatever, it's automatically going to format it. Just take the numbers out and put them back into REA in however format it's supposed to be. So now, one thing that I like to do when I'm importing owners is I like to make sure that they are investors when they come in. So that's as simple as there's a field in REA called investor on contacts. That field is the check mark on your contacts that tells you whether a contact's an investor. There's a field like that for investor, for tenant, for agent, for personal, and for prospect. Now, I don't actually have a field that I want to import into there, so what I can do is, in expression, instead of where I would normally drag and drop into that expression, I can just put my cursor in there, and within quotation marks, type true. That will check the investor checkbox for all of these contacts in the spreadsheet that are being imported in. So they'll automatically all be imported as investors. Now, there's a few things that I can't really go into too much, but as well as like being able to type into the expression, there's a button with 3 dots when you click in there that gives you some leeway to do something. Like, let's say in the notes I wanted to put the property information. Well, I could do that just by selecting notes. That way I can see it right from the owner's contact information. And I want to put the property name, address, city, state, zip code, and building size there. So I can click here in the expression box, click on the button with the 3 dots, and it brings up the expression editor. Now, this is a little bit more advanced than most people will ever need to use, but sometimes it comes up that you need it. Like, you can combine 2 columns in Excel into 1 field in REA using this, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do. You can also hit help for a little bit more in-depth information on everything. So there's operators, functions, and fields. And I'm just going to use fields for right now. I'm not going to get into much to the other stuff. But into notes, I wanted to, like I said, put the property name, and then I want to put a space. So I have to actually tell it a space with 2 quotation marks. Then after that, I want the address. So you can combine terms by using the ampersand on your keyboard. And then I want another, and then after the space, so after, yeah, there we go. So right now it's saying I want property name, and I want a space, and then I could choose my next field, address 1, and just kind of keep doing it like this. And so on. So if we hit test, we can see what that's going to look like. So in REA, it's going to come in as 20900 Roscoe Boulevard, Canoga Park, and you can get a little bit fancier. Instead of that space, I could, put that there to kind of use as a separator. And then I can just hit OK, and it's going to import multiple different Excel columns into that one notes field. So we'll see what that looks like when it comes into the database. So that's pretty much the gist of how to map everything together. Now, the next thing to do before you're ready to import is you want to make sure that you're not importing duplicates. REA has the ability to check and see if a contact or property already exists in the database before re-importing it. This is really useful for a property import where, like, this spreadsheet has 797 properties in it. There's probably going to be a few owners that own multiple buildings. I don't want the same owner to be imported 5 times if they import 5 buildings. I want that contact to be imported 1 time and linked to all 5 of those buildings. So this is accomplished with this column that says key. Now, I'm going to go over to the property side, and I'm just going to mark key for the APN number, or rather the APN, since N stands for number. So what that means is for each of the fields that are checked for key, check to see if this record already exists in my REA database or already in the import. And then, so it's going to check based on the parcel number to see if a property already exists in my database. Now, if it finds a match, what it does is update existing records. Right now, if it finds a match, it'll just ignore it or ignore the one that I have in my spreadsheet and do nothing. There's a few options, though. You can also have it import blank information. So like if it found a match but it didn't have the building size, it would fill in the building size from the spreadsheet but leave the rest alone. You can also use this to update information with always. So that way it'll, if it has an address, city, zip code, and all that, I probably should have state in here as well. Hold on, just because that will drive me crazy later on. It would override with whatever we have in the spreadsheet. So update existing records always means that the Excel spreadsheet you're importing overrides what you have in your REA. Never means that REA always wins out. When blank's always a safe bet because, I mean, it's not going to overwrite any of your work. It'll just add to it. So when blank is, when you're in doubt, choose when blank. And then I'm going to go over the owner tab, and you can choose a different set of keys for the owner. Property has a nice built-in key in parcel number. So if you have parcel numbers, you can use that pretty effectively as a key. If you didn't have a parcel number, though, you could also use like the address, the city, the state, and the zip code. anything that lets you know if that record's already a duplicate. So you wouldn't want to do it for stuff like building size or transaction date, anything like that. On the owner, I usually do the same thing, but on the company side, I'll do company, address, city, state, and zip code. Contact, I'll do pretty much the same way. Full name, address, city, state, and zip code. So then I'm going to choose one blank, just because I don't want to override anything if it finds someone, but I do want it to fill in blank information if I didn't have that information already. So what that means is that it's going to check based on the address, the city, the state, the zip code, and the company name. If it finds a match where all 5 fields match, and they have to match exactly, if it finds a match, it won't re-import the record. So it has to match all of the fields that you mark as key. So that's, you kind of want to take a Goldilocks and the 3 bears approach to this. You don't want too many things marked as key, because then you might end up with like one little typo that makes it to where it doesn't recognize a duplicate. You don't want too few, because, like, for example, if I just marked state, well, if there's another owner in California, it's going to think that's the exact same contact. So it's a matter of finding an amount of keys that are just right. And that was our fairy tale lecture for the day. So once you have your keys marked, we're ready to actually kind of start getting ready to import this. So now I'm just going to hit save to make sure that I don't lose any of the work that I've done here, and hit OK. It's already there. Do I want to replace it? Yes. So when I hit OK here, it's going to bring us to this screen where we can see what the information is going to look like in the database. So we see the property name, address, city, zip code, and so on. We also see that when I import it into the investor field and put true in there, well, it's going to check that checkbox for all those contacts. You can also click errors here and click this button here that'll scan for errors and see if there's any problems in the import. That'll look for dollar signs that are in fields that can only allow numbers, non-date type information that's going into a date, and so on. Well, ours looks good, so we're ready to go to the next step and hit next. So here we have the options of selecting our options, and here we can select who the owner of these records are. So if you want it to look like it was imported by someone else, you want to place the blame on someone else, you can choose them here. Personally, I like to make sure that all blame is put on Tim Cray. I'm sure none of you that know Tim would blame me for that. I mean, it's always nice to place the blame on your own boss, but actually I'm going to keep it as myself. Team. Now, you can have imported records come in as private, so only records that, or only you will be able to see those records, or you can go a little bit more robust and choose a specific team. You can also import into a specific group. So I'm actually going to create a new group, call it LA County Properties. And by default, when you create this group here, it's going to have a type unknown. That's the only way to make sure that the properties, the contacts, and the companies all get put into that group. If I specify that I want it to be a property group, that'll only put the properties into that group, since that group is not going to end up showing up under contacts or companies. So I'm going to keep the type as unknown, and that way I can easily do a query for all the properties in LA County Properties as well as the owners of those buildings. So I'm going to hit OK, and so we've now got our group that these are all going to import into. So now we're ready to import. We'll hit next and next one more time. So now this is going to start importing the data. I've got about, I think it's 797 it was. So it'll take about a minute to import that much information. The more information you have in the spreadsheet, the longer it'll take, of course. More columns, more different tables you're importing into. So like if I had a site contact and an agent, this would take slightly longer, which would be bad because I'm going to just sit here and, talk off the top of my head for a moment while I have nothing to show you. But luckily, we're almost done, and it's about halfway through the import. So it's not really a long process, and it is most definitely a lot faster than inputting information by hand. So when this is completed, we should have, let's see, you had 797 plus 27, 804. We should have theoretically 824 properties in our properties table, unless it found a match, of course. And ideally, when we look up the contacts that own those properties, there should be either 797 contacts or less, preferably less, because I know for a fact that that spreadsheet had multiple owners that had multiple buildings. So like there was one contact that would own 5 buildings, so that would import that one owner one time, so thus cutting the number of contacts compared to the properties by 4. Other things on this screen is there's an abort button, which lets you stop the import where it is, and a pause on error checkbox that will pause on error. All right, I'm going to go silent for a couple seconds and clear my throat while this finishes. The import is finished. When it's done, it'll say import complete. So we can just hit close and take a look at what damaged it was. So now I'm going to go ahead and close my property screen here. Let's go to View, Properties, and we now have 823 properties in our database. So it doesn't match up quite like I thought, so that means that I had one of the properties in there already. So now we can see where the different information went into. So on the property side, we see that it put the address in the right place. Kind of go here. It automatically split up the numbers and the street for us. And we see here that it's linked to Gerald Patashkin of Formosa Plazas, LLC. We can click on the owner tab to see that information right here as well. So we see the phone number came in, the name, the company name, the address of the contacting company, as well as the city, state, and zip code. The only other field that we imported into was the building size and the APN, or I guess fields in that case. So to put the building size in there and the APN right where we wanted it. So everything looks good on the property side. Now I want to bring up the contacts that I imported. So I'm actually going to do a query for the contacts in properties in that group. So 796 properties were imported. And I want to see the owners of those properties. Hopefully, when we go to look up linked owners, it'll be less. And it sure is. It's 648 people own the 796 properties. So there'll be a few if we go to links, and luckily one of them is the first one, which is kind of a blank named company, that owns both 8383 Topanga Canyon Boulevard and 8373 Topanga Canyon Boulevard. So if we kind of just browse through, we'll see, yeah, like so here's another one. Macy's corporate office, we have them owning 4 properties, 2 in Woodland Hills, 1 in Canoga Park, and 1 in Northridge. So that's pretty much in a nutshell how you import. Kind of went over a little bit longer than I had anticipated. There's some great help in the, if you go to help and training videos, there's some great help for this under importing. There's the simple import is pretty much what we just did now, but really dumbed down and pretty much just for contacts. There's some tips to help you clean your data before you import it into REA, so like making sure that you scrub the data to have like consistent information. And then there's cleaning REA9 data in Excel to import it back into REA. And that's actually a great one to watch because it allows you to create unique identifiers so you can export from REA using the export feature and then import it back in after you've made edits to that information. So take a look at those if you have a chance. This webinar will be back up on YouTube probably in the next, this one will take a while to upload since it's about 35 minutes, but it should be in the next couple hours. I will get this one up there. That one I promise you. I'll actually start it importing as soon as or uploading as soon as we're off the phone. So I thank you all for joining me today. I had a great time showing you how to import. It's kind of an important thing for a lot of people, so I want to make sure that I do this webinar every now and then. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions when you're going forward and importing, don't hesitate to call us. Importing is one of the things that people call us about absolutely the most, so you can always give us a call at 858-729-0154. Even if it's just like you think you got it, but you just want to make sure with us, like you've got all of your fields mapped, you think you got it matched to where it's not going to create duplicates, you can give us a call. We can spend a couple minutes going on your computer, taking a look at the map, and seeing if everything looks properly set up and making sure that everything's the way it should be. Don't hesitate to do so, because 5 minutes before doing the import is a lot better than spending 3 hours cleaning it up afterwards. All right, and we have another webinar tomorrow, which is part of the mini-series, and that will be on creating a suspect list and marketing to your contacts using the mail merge functionality in REA. So it's an exciting day for all of us tomorrow, and that'll be at 9 a.m. Pacific and noon Eastern. Thanks, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Take care.